Okay, welcome, Bomber Doodle, 4232.
Hey there, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. So, thanks for the link, first off. And one question I was curious about, because I've been listening more to your stuff since, like, I think around maybe January or February. Saw a few of your stuff. I saw your talks with Trent Horn, or your talk with Trent Horn, I should say. But I was curious, because I've noticed you and James Fodor and some others have talked about a lot of different, apologists, in one particular genre, like minimal facts arguments and the resurrection and Gary Habermas. So one thing I was wondering is if you had read, and this is like out of curiosity, it's not like if you read this book you will change your mind type of thing. I hate that, but anyway, but N.T. Wright's work on the resurrection of the Son of God, or any of his like videos or lectures on the subject.
Yeah, I've engaged with his videos and lectures on the subject. I've not read all of the. Are there 5 books? I think the first one is the context of. I've not read them. I'm familiar with some of the content in them. I'm familiar with some of N.T. Wright's views around these topics, but I haven't gone into any depth in that.
Yeah, I was just curious because I been thinking a lot about that. It's been a book I've been meaning to read for a while, but I've also been thinking more of something you had also talked about in an earlier video of, I forget how you titled it, but I remember the main theme was something that I've experienced too, of like the question of like, when is it epistemically justifiable to leave Christianity or any religion really? And it's really interesting because from various religious groups and sects, I've noticed a sort of it's a sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation where you can't really win. Like there's two, like for example, for me, I used to be a Calvinist, and I went from Calvinism to Catholicism and now going through like a deconstruction. But I noticed, and I used to think this was just a Reformed thing, a Calvinistic thing, because there was like 2 general responses. One was you didn't know Calvinism or Reformed theology, so you're basically just, stupid, and you didn't really read the best or most sophisticated theologians that we had. Then I met people that literally graduated from, PhDs and masters from different Reformed seminaries, and so that charge obviously couldn't be brought against them, and they also converted to Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. And so the tactic from different apologists critiquing them for their conversion, or as they would say it, the more hardline ones, like their apostasy, would be that, well, you may have known all this intellectual stuff, but basically you were spiritually dead the whole time and like reprobate and stuff. And so it's sort of like, I don't see how there's any way of winning. And I've encountered this too amongst Catholics. When talking to certain friends, like with deconstruction, where it's like, have you read this?
It's the same with Mormons, I think, and Jehovah's Witnesses and so on.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I used to know more. My evangelical days, I used to know more like former like Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's some nightmare stories there. But yeah, but I guess like I don't really know like what the answer to that question is necessarily, even from like a Christian standpoint.
To which question? Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, like when is it like justifiably?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, to like when you're epistemically justified to leave Christianity, because it just seems like the answer is essentially never. Like because and there's some better responses where in some respects I could respect it in so far if someone said like, look, I hold that Christianity is true, so of course I'm not going to say leaving truth is ever justified, right? Because that would be embracing falsehood. But I guess my question is, what for that person, what would it take? And this is just curious to ask anyone of any worldview, like what would it take to falsify your position? And I guess, and that's where like it gets more precise for different Christians and so forth. And a lot of them say the resurrection for one. So I guess that's also part of the reason why I asked or led with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult question because how people sort of evaluate, when people ought to change their belief is going to be, it's dependent on like a lot of their background beliefs, right? In their sort of belief structure. And I agree, there are a lot of religious belief structures where, it's basically, it's pretty much impossible from within the structure to ever really identify a point at which someone, is actually able to deconvert with sort of ordinary amounts of evidence that we might expect and so forth. I think there are cases I've seen some religious people make where they say it makes sense for people to deconvert. So there's a paper by someone, I forgot her first name, something Panchuk, called something like The Defeated Spiritual Self. And she kind of talks about how people who have experienced religious abuse or trauma, well, actually, even given theism, the best course of action for them to take might be for them to deconvert or deconstruct their beliefs in order to actually salve it, in order to sort of open the possibility for them somewhere down the line to have like an authentic or healthy relationship with God again, because they're just not going to be able to, given various types of trauma that they might have experienced in religious or spiritual contexts. And so I think that is something that more theists could sign up to, but it depends on your model of God, because a lot of theists have such a stringent and constrained doctrinal idea of what God is, that saying that God might, it might be okay with God for people to kind of deconvert if they've been harmed in a religious context because it's best for them. It's like, no, because the thing that matters is whether people say with their confess with their mouth that Jesus is Lord. I mean, it varies denomination to denomination, right? But
right, of course, yeah. It seems even like in Catholicism where there's more room and stuff in different views of soteriology, but there's still I think there's just something about the Abrahamic religions in particular that it is going to be more stringent, even with like some more nuanced options that might be available within those traditions. Fundamentally, it just seems like a very total system, basically. And I wanted to say totalitarian, but I don't mean that in like a Stalinist sense or something like that. But like it encompasses everything.
Totalizing, maybe, yeah.
It's just so life encompassing, and I guess fair enough for the historical and religio, political and cultural and everything background for those religions which they were caught up in. It makes sense how they developed with that, but and then I guess one last question, because I don't want to hog the thing up here, was what's your advice for I guess going through more thoroughgoing deconversion? Because just to be real brief, just with myself, there's been a lot of ping pong for me back and forth over the years since probably 2012, so it's been kind of exhausting. But there's been more things where it's lately where it's oh, I don't think this is necessarily going to change, or it would take a lot to change back, or the other options. And I've know similar close friends of mine who I never expected to be in a similar boat are now in a similar boat.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what advice is going to be good for everyone, because I can only sort of speak from my experience. But I think something I also don't want to give advice that sort of entails that the position that I occupy, is the right position, right? I want to kind of, if I can, offer pluralistic advice, which could result in someone going back to a different form of, a deconstruction. That doesn't mean deconversion. It would just mean maybe moving away from the position that they're in now, if they're reevaluating some of these beliefs. I think something for myself that was very difficult, but has been maybe the healthiest thing that's come out of my whole kind of leaving Christianity was relearning the ability to kind of trust my own beliefs and feelings about things. I think I'd sort of learned to almost gaslight myself in a kind of way where I didn't trust what I thought or believed. And it became very difficult for me to not train myself to trust, like my own beliefs about things or my own feelings about things, and begin to learn. Well, look, like I'm not sort of. Someone's put the link to that paper, The Shattered Spiritual Self, Philosophical Exploration of Religious Trauma. That's what it's called.
Oh, nice. I'll check that out.
So there is some sort of philosophy involved, I suppose, which is just think about the kind of God that you might think exists, sort of, and the kind of qualities that God has,
right?
And whether they would want you to, trust what you actually believe and trust your, beliefs and feelings and things. Whether they would kind of whether they'd want you to be kind of epistemically virtuous in terms of being as cautious as you can in thinking through these things, trying to avoid biases and stuff, or whether they'd kind of prefer you to be dogmatic. And I mean, I came to the conclusion that, even if the Christian God exists, that they would be kind of looking at the situation that I was in and see the evidence that I had available to me, or the ways that negative things had happened to me, and think, actually, they probably wouldn't think everything that I was doing was the best, right? But they'd probably also think, given the situation that this person's in with all their flaws and problems and stuff, it actually makes sense that would be the best option for them to do. And it's not the kind of thing that would, and then there's these beliefs about hell and so forth.
Right. Yeah.
And whether, that kind of God would look at that situation and go, so this person's going to have to burn for eternity because of some belief restructuring around some of these things. It just didn't, that it doesn't fit with what I would consider to be like a live option of a God that might actually exist. So, and kind of restructuring my beliefs in that way, it took a lot of time, but I had to learn to just trust myself and, trust like what I believe, trust my capacity to think things through, even though like recognizing that I'm fallible, but I can't think things through from any other position than my own, really.
Right. And no one else can. Reason is, not to go on a whole thing, but reason takes place within the realm of experience and is antecedent to all of our thought. I mean, there's a good Buddhist saying that everything we are is a result of what we've thought or contemplated, and like the basically interaction between experience and thinking. And there's other Christian like mystics and stuff that say things like that too, which is good because it's just like, and it's something where I find the postmoderns good on basically the contingency and contextual setting of things, because sometimes like with evangelicals you read some of them and everything is so black and white and absolute, and it's like this is not realistic at all. And I guess I relate to a lot of what you said, because I grew up in a very deeply religious household, and my father was clinically narcissistic personality disorder. So literally gaslighted about these things, but also within the various communities we were a part of growing up too, there was that sense. And so, having the sense of trusting yourself is to me, prima facie, it sounds kind of dumb, but over time I've realized, no, it makes so much sense because of what I've been through, what others have been through. And it's just, it's so annoying because it's fundamentally, and this is on other issues too, because fundamentally it's you're being told by other people that we don't believe your experiences, and you're lying or you're wrong for having these feelings. And it's well, okay. So yeah, but and
that doesn't, I don't think that has to lead to deconversion or anything as well. It might lead you back to almost the same theology as you sort of have now, but what I think would lead to, even if that is the case, is you sort of being in this healthier position, right, where you're kind of comfortable with what you believe. You don't feel like you believe it as the upshot of like pressure from people around you, or like at least I think there's beliefs that I've adopted either because of expectations, or just being in social contexts where I'm expected to believe certain things, and I think it's just a healthier place to be in, where it's like you just authentically believe what you believe, right? Rather than it being, it doesn't come with all the kind of like dissonance baggage and stuff, of like forcing yourself to hold on to positions because of these expectations.
Yeah, it's authentic. I was about to say, if you need me to go, I can go. But if
no, it's okay. I don't have anyone else lined up at the minute.
I was about to say,
if someone is listening and wants to call in, feel free to say. Go ahead.
Okay, I was about to say, if I can stay, I'd like to stay because I like this conversations, and I've definitely appreciated your thoughts about things, because like I've noticed like there's a lot of cognitive dissonance out there on especially religious experience stuff, but I mean even within other groups too, like pathology of ideology, like fundamentalism applied to other groups and stuff, like even like politically or philosophically or whatever. I just find it, going back to what you said before, because like for me right now, the only like form of Christianity that holds sway over me, or that I'm at least like considering, is like different like universalistic versions of like Eastern Orthodoxy or of Catholicism. There's still aspects of like the teachings on sexuality that I don't accept, because I don't find them to be, I just feel like, this may sound simplistic, but I just feel like where we've come psychologically and like in the psychiatric literature and things, like I feel like we know so much more about human sexuality now, where a lot of like not that it entirely undermines like any type of like sexual ethic at all, but like at least the more traditional Christian conceptions of it, like it doesn't make sense to view like homosexuality as wrong, or at least like in the Levitical penal code as like being sanctioned by death, basically. We're like, that's stupid. Like this is like Cthulhu level stuff. Like, and then also again, that gets into debates even within like Old Testament scholars, where they will literally say like, well, actually, like, in Isaiah, Jeremiah is where you get the more high God, philosophical, eternal attributes. But then in the Pentateuch and other aspects, you have the more like tribal deity and hedonistic monotheism type of thing, the development of that. And so even within Christian groups, there's different ways of interpreting like the development of the concept of God that even like David Bentley Hart, who's Orthodox, like accepts. So I know it's more complicated than that, but at the same time, it's sort of, I guess it's a saving grace, because like it seems like the most fair and less terrible version, because it seems like there actually does seem to be a sort of sense of actual justice, instead of just like in whether in Calvinism. Well, in Calvinism, you literally don't even get a chance, because you're just predestined to heaven or hell by fiat and all voluntarism behind that. So, and even in different forms of like more Augustinian or certain Thomistic versions of Catholicism, there's that type of very high determinism too, like in Suarez and Banez and the Manualist Thomist tradition. So, so it's not that you escape it completely, but there's still better options in Catholicism, at least with hopeful universalism, like with Balthazar and Rahner. But I still find, I don't know, I'm looking more into David Bentley Hart stuff, and I want to look more into like N.T. Wright stuff on the resurrection, because like I don't really know how to put it into words, but like I get weird, I guess that's the kids say, I get weird vibes, man, like from like Habermas or like others, minimal facts arguments, where it's like,
feels a little bit like you're being sold something.
Because it's, and the thing that's still, I guess, sticking to me right now is this gap between like, one of the like minimal facts that is often brought up, and like to be fair, I do think it like that like the basically New Testament scholarship from all perspectives, like religious and non, is that like the disciples did believe they had some type of experience of Jesus, of postmortem Jesus, and that's something that I do think warrants like investigation further. But like tying that with like epistemology and how much we could know about that, I'm not sure. And that's what, I mean, that essentially is sort of what Bart Ehrman kind of gets to when he's in some of his lectures and debates I've listened to recently, where he would say a similar thing, that argues that the resurrection is not properly, history, but we can know that the disciples certainly believed that Jesus rose from the dead. And that still gives me pause, though, because for me, where I'm at right now is a naturalistic interpretation is not implausible. And I think Ehrman gives like the best, or at least more, not so naturalistic, but he gives like the best, I guess, more like agnostic arguments for it. But it's also not, again, there's this weird type of modus operandi amongst various Christians, more so evangelicals, but I found this in my, being Catholic too, where it's sort of like, especially with apologetics in particular, it's like, hey, oh, this person's doubting. Here's this book on subject X, like the resurrection or the problem of evil or whatever. And they like the book. The people that are recommending the book really like the book, and the apologist is really good in their circles or whatever. And then they recommend to the parishioner or person who's struggling with these doubts. And the expectation is, if you read this, you will agree with it. And I'm like, why do you assume that? Why do you assume that they will not, like, if one expects or assumes, or I at least hope, that you read any type of book at all, but especially apologetic stuff, critically, looking for the truth and stuff, then it's not guaranteed that you're just going to buy into it all wholesale. Maybe partially or whatever. Like, it just seems like, at least ordinarily, there's kind of just the assumption of like, read this and you'll be good. But it's like, how do you know that though? And I don't think they do. I think, and it's not that they don't mean well. I think the majority of the times they do mean well, because it's, again, community aspect oriented. They don't want people to either go to hell or to, be spiritually unwell in any sense. So it's kind of, and now, to be fair though, in my own experience, like, there have been times where people have recommended books to me and I was like, oh wow, this is actually really good. But like, I had to make that assessment. I had to make that judgment. That's the thing. You can't tell people what to believe or how to like respond to things. It's like, just let people experience it and like assess it for themselves. And I guess it's the very impositional nature of Christianity that's so annoying about it.
Well, I think it's certain high control communities, perhaps, but I mean, it depends on what you're. And if you had if you did a statistical sample, I think it'd probably be more than half of those communities that do, have some kind of quite controlling tendencies in some ways, right? But I do think there are communities out there that are less like that you can find as well. And it sounds like you're thinking some of these things through from a new perspective. Just, you don't have to deconvert. You don't have to stop going to church or anything. Just kind of, trust what your thinking is on these topics, and come to your own conclusions would be my only advice. I have got a few people backstage now, though, so I'm going to wrap up our talk. But it's been nice to talk to you. If there's any kind of last words you want to say.
That's pretty much it. Maybe in the future, I have a YouTube channel I'll be like revitalizing and stuff. So maybe if you're open to like a future conversation, I'd like to
absolutely
do something. Yeah, no
problem. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on. And let me know. My email's in the About tab, or any other social media or whatever you've got me on. Feel free to talk to me through there if you want.
Will do. Thanks for having me on, Nathan. I appreciate it.
No problem. See ya.
All right.